Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 380. 380. Wow. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff, and it is Monday, November 24th. I am coming to you from New York City, USA. And coming up, I've got a great guest, independent veteran candidate for Congress from North Carolina, Jon Thorp, as we continue our Meet the Independent Candidate series.
Meet the independent candidates.
And meeting another independent veteran who is stepping up to run in a special election happening next week. But before we get to that awesomeness, the news just keeps on coming. And it feels like Friday was a lifetime ago, but there is a lot to get into. Top story right now that I want to bring your attention to, it's breaking news from CNN that Pete Hegseth and the Department of Defense have said they've launched a thorough review of allegations against Senator Mark Kelly, the astronaut, Navy combat veteran guest on this show, which could, quote, lead to recall to active duty for court-martial procedure or administrative measures. This is coming after Trump fired off at Kelly and other Democratic lawmakers for a video they made reminding service members of their duty to disobey illegal orders. This is a big deal. I think it's very dangerous territory for Hegseth and Trump to be diving into. The debate comes up, this debate came up in the past about recalling someone to active duty for court-martial around Mike Flynn when he was calling for the overthrow of the government in January 6th. But that, I think, may have even been warranted. This is a whole different thing. This is a sitting U.S. senator. This is a member of the opposition political party. It's, I think, unacceptable and uncharted territory to attack political enemies and free speech and intimidate every single member of the retiree community in America. If you're a military retiree, you should be watching this story, because if they can come after a U.S. senator, they can come after you. I think all Americans should be outraged and alarmed. We'll get into that coming up with John, and I hope Senator Kelly will join us in the days to come. Maybe his brother, Scott Kelly, will come back. But this is a really important story for us to focus on coming into Monday. On Friday, Trump met with Mamdani. If you missed it, there was a love fest between Trump and Mamdani that kind of shocked everyone. I still think that Trump taints and eats everything, and this meeting will ultimately do the same for Mamdani, especially with his socialist base. But it was an unexpected surprise on Friday where the two of them seemed to have a love fest. And in the end, frankly, I don't trust any politicians, and it looks like both of them may have gotten an upside here. And most Americans are still somewhere in the middle, with a pretty extreme guy on the right, a pretty extreme guy on the left, and most of us feeling like the referee in the middle. In Ukraine, this continues to unfold in dramatic fashion. It turns out that the shit sandwich, the shit sandwich that Trump has offered Zelensky, a 28-point plan, was actually a plan from the Russians that they just forwarded. This is going off the rails in big ways. The 28-point plan now is being positioned as a starting point, but it looks like a major fumble of diplomacy and execution from the White House, and Zelensky and the Europeans are pushing back. In other news, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, arrived in Puerto Rico today as the U.S. ramps up pressure on Venezuelan President Maduro. Keep your eye on this space. We've covered it on the show, but Venezuela is still unfolding. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, the former Trump loyalist, says she's resigning from Congress. So that was some rare and unexpected good news out of Washington late on a Friday. FBI Director Kash Patel is under scrutiny for use of SWAT teams to protect his girlfriend. None of us should be surprised. We'll watch this space. And in other news, breaking news today, the cases against James Comey and Letitia James have been dismissed. This is a part of the vendetta campaign where Trump is coming after his political enemies. He's come after James Comey. He's come after Tish James. And both of these cases have been dismissed. But now he's lining up somebody new in Senator Mark Kelly. I think it's a reflection of how he's weaponizing not only the Justice Department, but the Department of Defense. Starbucks workers are still on strike. The American military has not blasted a boat yet today. It's been 7 days, which is noteworthy. It was a wild weekend of college and NFL football. Oregon won a fun one against USC. The Bears are 8-3. The Patriots are for real. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs. Baltimore is always dangerous with Lamar Jackson, and the Giants keep finding new ways to be awful and break my heart. If you watched on Friday, Admiral Bill McRaven made some picks on college football, and he was 2 for 2 with the Army-Navy game coming up in a couple weeks. My boys had their final week of soccer after a fantastic season. Want to congratulate them, the parents, and all the coaches. And it is Monday. Thanksgiving week is here. We have a lot to be thankful for, but many reasons to stay vigilant. All right, and helping us stay vigilant, we are reactivating our Meet the Independent Candidate series because there is a special election, one that is drawing a lot of money and a lot of attention. It's happening next week on December 2nd. Early voting has already started, and there is an independent veteran in the middle of it, and he is joining us today. He is a man who stepped into the breach. He is taking punches from all sides. He is up for election next week, and he's joining us on Independent Americans exclusively today. The great and powerful Jon Thorp is here on Independent Americans. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Just one minor note. It's Tennessee, not North Carolina. I think you're thinking of
sorry.
Clinton.
My apologies. My apologies. I had North Carolina on the brain. It is Tennessee. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good starting point. We're right outside of Nashville is where we're talking about here, right? Can you tell us where exactly this district is?
Yeah, this spreads across 14 counties from the Kentucky line on the north side of Tennessee all the way down to Alabama, and it actually carves out downtown Nashville. You know, gerrymandering. They've tried to make sure that it's going to be a very safe district for the Republicans. They've been in power for who knows how long out here. It was a comfortable, I think, 22, 24-point lead for Trump, and the incumbent was always a shoo-in. It'll be an interesting race because it's getting pretty close from what a lot of the pollsters say.
We're going to get into that in a second. I want to explain the forces you're up against, your unconventional path. But let me start with the question I ask everybody, John. It's a Monday in America. Where are you and how are you?
I am north of Nashville, about 45 minutes in rural Tennessee, and doing fantastic. Weather is nice. This time of year is always just gorgeous because the leaves have started to fall and bugs are not around, and it's just nice, crisp, cool. You get the fog that rolls in throughout the hills. It's really picturesque. And I'm in Robertson County, which I believe is the world capital for smoke-fired tobacco. And so we have all the tobacco barns all over the place, and it's like straight out of a movie or something. It's really nice.
I've been through that area. I've got a lot of friends in that area. It's a very, very cool and interesting area for a lot of reasons, and now has the political world's sights fixed on it. I want to get to the details of your campaign, but let me ask you, as a veteran yourself, as a man who wants to be in Congress next year to take on these kinds of issues, there's this breaking news about the Department of Defense threatening to come after a retiree, a decorated combat veteran in Senator Mark Kelly. You know, this is Independent Americans. I think all folks should be outraged regardless of their political background, but what's your take on it, John?
Yeah, I think it's a clear overreach of power and is intended to be a cooling effect, chilling effect for speech. The Democrats, and in this case, Kelly specifically, is not saying anything that isn't taught in training constantly for anybody in the military. This is straight out of the Nuremberg trials. They rail into your heads. You are required to disobey unlawful orders. And they go into great detail about what is or is not a lawful order. So it's a really, really poor precedent.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's what's to come, right? I mean, this will discourage people from getting into politics at a time when we are at IVA, Independent Veterans America, we're recruiting to find guys and gals like you who can step up and serve their communities. And I think it's going to have that chilling effect. I also don't know where it's going to end. I mean, I would not be surprised if he did the same thing for General Milley, for potentially the other folks who have served in uniform and are now in politics. So I think this is a very, very, very big deal and a crossing of the Rubicon. I know Comey's going to get a lot of attention today, and the other cases are going to get attention, but I hope the country can understand how big and important this is for our Constitution. Let me dig into your race here and give folks some highlights, and then you can correct me if I get any of this wrong, right? But this is a special election, right, where now you've got Trump forces, Harris forces. This is the biggest election really since Election Day, where the Democrats seem to do well. There's a MAGA supporting super PAC that's put over $1 million in to support Matt Van Epps, who is the Republican candidate, former helicopter pilot, who is all in on Trump. There was a special election after Republican Mark Green retired earlier this year. Like you mentioned, he had won the district pretty handily by 21 points in 2024. Trump had a similar margin. Then we redraw the stakes, and here comes some big money. it looks like Democratic allies have jumped in. And there's now a, I guess, popular Democrat who I think is to the left, Afton Bain, who has been surging. Democratic money is pouring in there. And you've got kind of what we think is unfortunately all too commonplace in America, where you've got somebody who looks too far to the right and someone who looks too far to the left. And here you sit in the middle. There's also a couple of minor independent candidates in addition to you. But did I lay out the stakes of this accurately, you think, or did I get anything wrong?
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job. I would say that the Democratic candidate is not terribly popular. I think she only won with 28% of the vote, just barely squeaked by. There were 4 of them, and they were within 2 or 3 points of each other. So it was a very, very close race on the Democrat side. The Republican was, and there were 3 top candidates that had throughout the polls for many weeks kind of fought each other for who was going to be in the top position. Matt generally was actually lagging on that until Trump came out and offered his support just days before the primary, and obviously just did a massive, massive change on tipping the scale, so to speak, to give him ultimately, I think it was 51% of the vote. That was instrumental in getting Matt elevated to where he is, and yeah, he's been shown to be very much the establishment candidate. Whether or not Afton is the establishment for the Democrat, I'm not entirely sure, but they've both parties have come out, like you said, and basically pulled out all the stops, and they're throwing money in here big time.
So, John, let's do a bit of a reset here for folks who don't know who you are, and I hope they'll read up on you afterward. You know, it's hard for independents to get national media. I want to try to give shine to them anytime I can, especially if it's an independent veteran. Tell folks about your background, please, John, and why did you decide to run in this race now, and why as an independent?
Well, I grew up in South Dakota and joined the Army pre 9/11, and I was actually here at Fort Campbell, which is on the north side of Tennessee, during 9/11, and it was an eye-opening experience for me. Bounced around a little bit, and my wife and I moved back here about 12, 13 years ago. We've been here ever since. This is our forever home, so to speak. And I joined as an independent because I recognize that Washington is not doing its job. I think, I'm sure you've seen all the polls. Most people think that Congress cannot solve, I think it's something like 74%, 76% said that Congress can't solve a single important issue because they're too partisan. And I talk to people constantly, and they feel like their voice doesn't matter. They're not listened to. They're disillusioned. They're upset at the status quo, and they're ready for something different. And so I think kind of pushing forward that that oath that we make as members of the military, where we protect the country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think it's not necessarily an enemy, but the two-party system has kind of created a system where they are more interested in furthering power, and they aren't talking or representing the people. So I think we need to change that.
So, John, you originally, there's this new generation of independents that are coming in many different forms. We've had Democrats who have switched to independents. We've had Republicans who've switched to independents. We have folks who've never been anything and have been independent. But you started this race as a Republican, and it looks like they didn't accept you, and now you're an independent. Can you explain how that went down, and maybe address for folks who are worried that maybe you're not really an independent because you were a Republican pretty recently?
Well, I hesitated with that label a little bit. I'm not a politician. I'm willing to put that out right in the forefront. I haven't voted since 2000. That's a game changer for a lot of people. They say, well, you haven't voted for so long, then why are you even here? Well, because I was that disillusioned voter. I was the one who said, they're not listening to me. They don't care about me. So why am I going to vote for the lesser of two evils? That's immoral, in my opinions. When I decided that I needed to do something, and it was being selfish of me to just sit on the sidelines and not do something, because I have 2 young kids now, I decided that Tennessee being what it is, like we talked about, it's that 20-plus point lead. You have to be a Republican to win. And so I begrudgingly filed with the FEC back in March to run as a Republican. And like you said, I didn't qualify for their bylaws, and they refused to answer me when I asked for an exception to policy. So I said, screw it. I'm going to run as an independent. And that was the best move I've ever made. When I was on social media and talking about things, I felt like I was always having to censor myself about what I should or shouldn't say because I didn't want to upset the party line. And after I declared independence, I thought, holy crap, what was I thinking? It was truly liberating when I did that.
I appreciate the candor, man. I mean, that's a very non-political answer, which is part of why I think a lot of folks are responding to you because you've been authentic about it. And I think that's not unusual. A lot of folks started out as Democrats, started out as Republicans because it was convenient, because they wanted to vote in closed primaries. And for me, I think the exciting part of this movement is it's welcoming everybody, right? Because it's so informal. I mean, independent is literally, lacking affiliation. So if someone kicks you out, if you don't feel at home, if you're looking for an alternative, independent is kind of that bucket for everybody, right? For all of the politically homeless. Can I ask you, now that you are, kind of newly reborn here, how do you define independent? If people say to you, what does it mean to you to be an independent? What does that mean to you, Jon?
Well, I think you just you don't have any party lines. You have no affiliation. There are no leadership. It's not necessarily that you don't have ideas, you don't have an ideology. It's that there's no structure that tells you how you should vote. And if you don't vote in a particular way, they're going to kick you out. And I think that's the biggest problem with the major parties, really any party. And so I lean conservative. I was recently involved in some forums with other independent candidates from around the U.S., and most of them, for whatever reason, have leaned on the left. And what is remarkable, I think, about the independent movement is that we can come together, discuss topics based on their merit and whether or not a proposed solution is good without necessarily looking at those party labels. We don't have to automatically say, no, I'm not going to vote for that because you're the wrong party. And that's what America needs, I think, to move forward.
I think that's an exciting part of it because there's many faces of the independent movement. And we've had Tim Kelly on the show, the mayor of Chattanooga in Tennessee. We've had, the mayor of Mayor Yemi Mobilati of Colorado Springs. We've met folks who are left of center, right of center. But the commonality is I think, as our friend John Updike has said, it's not an affiliation, it's an attitude. Right. And it's a lack of affiliation. It's kind of a middle finger to all of the existing systems. And that really is what unites us. Can you talk about your obstacles? Running as an independent, right? You tried to go that route of being a Republican. And if you had gotten the nomination, you might have gotten millions of dollars of support from PAC money and all kinds of other places. Can you talk about how hard it's been to run as an independent and how much harder it's been for you than for the partisans?
Yeah, here's a good example. When I had first run as the Republican, before they decided that I wasn't truly a bona fide Republican and kicked me out, they sent me a big spreadsheet full of hundreds and hundreds of contacts of media, people that I should contact, of powerful people within each county, of kind of the influencers that I should be talking with and making sure that's how I would be getting the name out and my recognition and influencing the voters. And just stuff like that. When I went to independent, there is nobody, there's no structure. And so simultaneously, it's one of its best aspects for it is that you don't have, like I said, you don't have anybody telling you how to vote, but then you also don't really have anybody that's supporting you. So there are actually people that we're trying to, there's some organizations that are trying to remedy that so we can kind of have some sort of solidarity and support structure, especially leading into 26. Pure acts of omission, I think, have been one of the hardest parts of being an independent because it's kind of a chicken or egg conversation of a lot of the media don't contact me or don't do any stories or put me on the air because I'm not a valid candidate or I'm not viable. But I'm not viable because they're not putting me on the airwaves. Like at some point you have to somehow get in there. I'm sure we're going to talk about it later. Recently there was a super PAC that sent out some mailers for my campaign. And I think that, unfortunately, it's as distasteful as it is, I think that forced the hands of a lot of the larger media to actually finally get us in. I got on the local TV channel. The New York Times reached out. And there have been a number of folks that have reached out since that. I think probably had that not occurred, they wouldn't have bothered.
Yeah, I saw the forum you did locally with the two other independent candidates. Interestingly, one of them was kind of billing himself as a legacy of Elon Musk's America Party, but he didn't seem to have ever talked to Elon Musk or ever actually gotten an endorsement from Elon Musk. So there's a lot of this stuff being kind of thrown at the wall, right? But I thought, you had integrity and you had, I think, a message that seemed a bit more authentic to me. than the other independents there. But let's talk about that issue there, and I'm going to lay it out and tell me if I get it right. It sounds like there are Democratic allies who want to undermine Van Epps, the Republican, the MAGA back guy, by promoting you, who they view as a conservative independent, right? So the idea is that they will spend money and to try to pull votes away from him and toward you. So this group, Your Community PAC, spent more than, I don't know, millions of dollars in your district. I don't even know if you know, but you're not allowed to coordinate with them. You didn't coordinate with them. All of a sudden, these mailers start showing up from a group you've never heard of because they think you're a way to take away from the Republican voters votes and help their Democratic candidate, who is pretty far to the left of you. This is the Wild West of unencumbered money, right? Unlimited PAC money, where independent organizations can just jump in and totally disrupt the landscape. Did I get that right? And maybe you can tell us what the latest is and what that was like to find out, okay, you wake up one morning and somebody's blasting your district with mailings that have your name on it that you've never seen or heard of.
Yeah, you hit it pretty well on the head. I got an email from someone saying, "Hey, I'm really interested in supporting you. You sound a lot like what I'm looking for, but can you clarify the second point on your mailer?" And I said, "Mailer? What mailer?" This was literally the first time I heard about a mailer. And so I asked him to send me a picture of it, and I said, "That's definitely not mine. It's not authorized. I'm sure you can see somewhere the fine print down there. It's put out by somebody else." And that's, I think, a good reason why we need election reform. Interestingly, going into this race, the budget was my number one issue. I think the budget represents probably the primary existential threat for the United States. If we don't address it, we're not going to have a United States as we know it today. But since I started running, I would actually put election reform at the number one, because we're not going to even be able to address the budget unless we can break the power, the monopoly. It's literally a monopoly over our structure by the two parties. So yeah, anyway, we had, mailers come out. Now there are, just recently I found out there are online advertisements as well, where they literally just stole my images and logos off my website, which that's probably a copyright violation. But the FEC, here's where it gets crazy. We're not supposed to coordinate or communicate with these super PACs. That's what makes them independent. And the minute that you do, it's illegal, because now it's coordination and it falls differently. But at the same token, I can't call them and coordinate with them to say, stop using me and my likenesses and my images and my policy as if I were putting out these mailers, because that also would be illegal. So I have to hire a lawyer to do it for me. And this is a small grassroots campaign. It's kind of humorous. People keep telling me I'm funded by Soros, but the FEC filing shows otherwise. But I can't even, there are better things for me to be spending my money on than some lawyer to tell a super PAC that's spending millions of dollars on this race. They don't care. They're going to drag it out.
Yeah, but I think this is really, really important, right? And it's also a caution for other independent candidates. I mean, we've had Dan Osborne on this show. We'll have him on again. I mean, one of the knocks on Osborne was that he was Democrat Dan, right? That he was secretly a Democrat, right? In this case, you're being kind of ambushed by this group that doesn't have to coordinate with you, and you don't have the resources to fight. So they could basically turn you into whatever they want because they've got the ability to put millions of dollars in there. And as an independent, you don't even have enough money to get a lawyer. I mean, this is a really, really important, I think, case study in why our election systems are broken. We need people like you to step up. We need people like you to volunteer to run. But we've also got to understand that it's a hard thing for you and for your family to even step into the ring. Let me ask you, I'm glad you talked about the budget deficit. That's an issue for you that we don't hear a lot about from independents, frankly. But I think the budget, I think taxes, I've talked about it before. I think those are issues that most Americans do care about. You talked about campaign finance reform. Are there other issues in your Tennessee district that you're focused on that you want folks to know about that you think are important?
Yeah, I think everything kind of falls underneath the money supply. How maybe not the money supply, the affordability. So because we have been spending without restraint for so long, our dollar has become worth less and less and less constantly. And so the erosion of the money supply itself has, I would argue, exacerbated every other problem that we have today, whether it's housing prices, whether it's the price of groceries, healthcare, even immigration. Immigration wasn't really, it was important. And people said, yeah, we need to do something about all these illegals coming in. But it wasn't really an issue, or like, SNAP and things like that. It wasn't really an issue until suddenly the middle class, and economists like to say that this is kind of full of shit, excuse the language. But the disappearing of the middle class. If you're middle class, you know for a fact that it is happening, and economists will say, no, it's they'll justify whatever, but people are being pushed out because the value of the dollar has been eroding, and so it costs more and more and more just to survive, which makes you work harder and harder and harder. And then you look at all these people who are getting handouts from the government, and it pisses people off. And so it makes them want to crack down on immigration and crack down on the healthcare subsidies for people who in their mind aren't working as hard as they are. So, it's turned into a really volatile situation where it's like the haves versus the have-nots, and it's forcing people to draw a line somewhere. And I don't like the direction that it's going, because it can very easily lead to violence.
I think that message will resonate with a lot of people. Let me ask you this, John. I know you were asked this in the local interview that I saw in Tennessee. Who would you caucus with if you won? This is an important question, I think, for every independent. We're seeing this new wave of independent candidates more and more almost by the day. I continue to try to highlight them. We'll feature them on this show. But if you run the table here and you land the Hail Mary and you win next week, who would you caucus with?
So I would not caucus with either one for this one if I was to win. I will certainly have discussions with both parties on the merits, again, of the individual bill. I am of the opinion that we should go back to actually one issue, one bill, one vote. None of these omnibus bills actually apply funding for these things, so we're not stuck with the continuing resolution. Stop increasing the budget ceiling, or the debt ceiling rather. I would say a more likely scenario is that I can win next year. And the goal is to get a number of independent candidates from across the U.S. in the House. And if we can get, say, 5 or 10 people in there, we would probably remove the majority from both parties, which would give the independent caucus some phenomenal amount of power, because both parties would have to deal with us in order to get anything passed. Or, imagine the surprise here, or they're going to have to reach across the aisle and work with the Democrats or the Republicans as the need varies. But and that's how it should be. So it's crazy that we have to force it, but I think that's ultimately the power and the purpose of the independent movement. I personally believe that it's going to be transitory. Our human beings are tribal. We want to very easily recognize who is trustworthy and who is not. And that's why we have these partisan labels and things like that. The problem is just that, like I said, they've had a monopoly over power for so long that they've gotten lazy and they've forgotten what the purpose of the party was. So we just need to maybe slap them around a little bit, bring some power back to the people, maybe start adding some additional third parties, change the voting around a little bit. So maybe ranked choice voting or multi-member or whatever. There's a bunch of different possible solutions. So maybe we need 3 or 4 or 5 parties rather than just
John. So this is a really exciting idea that I want folks to hear about, right? So the idea is that we have a couple of independents in Congress that can create this very powerful fulcrum. And I think this is part of what people who maybe in your district don't, and most districts don't really understand. If they can get you in there as an independent, you immediately become super powerful, right? Because you are not aligned with either party. They got to fight for you. You become like the Joe Manchin type, right? And if we can get a couple of them together, then we've got a real fulcrum. We've got a real, maybe even a speaker, right? If they can't agree on a speaker, maybe they could come together and agree on an independent speaker. And I think the potential on the Senate is the same. The potential in city councils and all across this country is really, really exciting. And I don't think folks understand. We only need a couple, right? And that can create that fulcrum effect. So let me break that down, John. So this is a special election. It's an off-cycle election. It's December 2nd, I think, right? And so that election will be decided, and then whoever wins will have to run again next year, right? So less than 1 year from.
Yeah, it's less than a year. Whoever is going to be there is basically doing nothing other than campaigning again.
If you don't win, John, are you going to run again for next year?
Absolutely. And again, I actually filed back in March, and look at my filing. I filed for 2026. That's always been the goal, and it hasn't changed. This was just a speed bump, sort of a diversion in the middle.
Excellent. John, I just want to give you the floor here for a minute before we wrap. I do this with all the candidates, especially for folks, in Tennessee. They're going to see this in your district, in the 7th district, but also outside the country, folks who want to support you for the long term, because I think guys like you that are stepping up are part of wave after wave that will continue to break and open up holes. So I hope folks understand that hearing from you is not just about this election next month, but it's about fueling this movement. Jon, why should folks across the country and in Tennessee's 7th district support you, and how can they do it?
Is the website. I'm on all the social media platforms pretty much, so there's links within my website you can go to. I'm trying to revamp that a little bit so we can get all our video and stuff on there as well, but I'm not very technically savvy, so doing the best I can. Once I have a little bit more time, I'll probably do that. Ultimately, again, this is, like you said, it's about the movement. It's not about my race. It's not about me. It's about breaking the glass ceiling, so to speak, so we can get in there and start changing things to better represent the people. Gallup polls says 47% of Americans identify as independent, and we have no representation right now. And we need to change that. The only way we're going to change that is to stop believing the narrative that we have to vote for the lesser of two evils. We outnumber them. So we should have some sort of representation. And the only way we're going to do that is by forcing it. And don't fall into the trap of, voting for an independent is a spoiler and you're going to cause the country to go socialist or communist or fascist or whatever. It's a lie.
Jon, I appreciate you. You also were very flexible. We had to schedule this around some changes, and as a testament to your flexibility and leadership, you hung in there and we got it done. But I really admire your courage in stepping up to do this, and also your foresight and understanding this is not just about next week. It's about the next decade, the next couple of decades. And I hope folks will check out Jon's website, support him if you can, donate, volunteer. And investing in Jon and this voice is also investing in the future of our movement. So, Jon, I wish you the best of luck next week, and a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family in between, man.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, that's Jon Thorp running for Congress in Tennessee's 7th district. My apologies for saying North Carolina earlier, but this is the kind of content we want to bring to you every single day. We are daily now. Independent Americans is coming at you roughly every 24 hours or so. We'll try to drop these episodes before dinner time, East Coast. Follow us on social media. Hit that subscribe button, especially if you're watching on YouTube right now. Get the merch. Join our Patreon community. Your Patreon support helps us bring independent voices like Jon Thorp that the national media is not talking to. You help us bring that forward. We're going to have a big week ahead. There is a lot going on. We will have guests on tomorrow. During the week, at some point, I'm going to break a 2-part special of a conversation I had with a number of independent candidates a couple weeks ago. We had all 4 that are running for Senate so far in a conversation. You're going to hear that later in the week. We've got Todd Achilles from Idaho, Ty Pickens from Mississippi, Brian Bangs from South Dakota, Dan Osborne of Nebraska. We also had Donna Charles join us, who ran for governor of Virginia, and others. It's going to be some hope for the holidays. We're also going to continue to stay focused on Venezuela, these attacks on Senator Kelly, and everything else. It is some hope ahead of the Thanksgiving holidays, but we're going to bring you content. If you haven't caught up on last week, please do. We had some really important conversations that might have been ahead of the curve. We talked with my friend Kevin Barron about all the things related to national security, related to this Democrat video. We talked to Admiral McCraven on Friday, who broke down what is an illegal order, what is not. And Asha Rangappa, military scholar and expert, broke down all these issues that are now front and center this week. So check those out. It's some hope for your holidays and ahead of Thanksgiving. America might be divided, but especially this Thanksgiving week, we at Independent Americans are working to change that. If you're among the 50% of independents, especially, this is your show. We're going to keep bringing you independent voices you may not have heard of before. Folks like Jon Thorp. Country over party, people over politics, light over heat, busting up that status quo and challenging all of it and giving you reasons to be thankful. If you enjoyed this episode with Jon Thorp, please share it far and wide. Invite others to declare their independence and stay vigilant, my friends, especially this week, because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And hope is the oxygen of democracy. I hope you got a dose of that hope today from Jon and from this show every day. No, you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all in this together. Stay vigilant, America. It's only Monday, but we have something to be thankful for, and that's this community. We're going to keep after it. I'll see you tomorrow. Stay vigilant, America.
Powered Powered by Righteous Media.